Hello, Jeff Zwarenk, and welcome back to Give and Take, the segment of our show where we explore important scientific ideas and how they point to the God of the Bible. Today I'm joined by Fazale Rana, and we're going to look at the origin of monogamy and how that points to a creator. Fuzz, good to have you here today.
Jeff?
So let's kind of get right at the bottom line there. I'm curious, what do the origins of monogamy have anything to do with pointing to a creator?
Yeah, well, when you think about monogamy, you probably, like most people, would think about a relationship between two human beings where they're committed to each other for life.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, monogamy is observed in the animal world, where there are some species where the mates will pair or bond for life. And so, and other species where that's not observed. So scientists are trying to understand in evolutionary terms the origin of monogamy, and what they've uncovered is something that is very uncomfortable for the evolutionary paradigm. It doesn't fit in the evolutionary paradigm, but makes perfect sense if a creator.
Okay. So it's this kind of tension that evolution has a difficulty explaining it, but it makes sense in a creation context. So
yes.
So what is it about monogamy that points toward, or that makes it look like there's a creator that's instantiated it?
Well, there was a study done just recently where researchers were trying to understand what were the genetic basis for monogamous behavior. And so they had a number of species that represent animals across the animal kingdom, where you had sister species where one was monogamous, one was non-monogamous. And so they looked at genetic differences in the neural tissue for the monogamous versus the non-monogamous species. And what they discovered was a set of 24 genetic changes that impacted 24 different genes that were consistent in the monogamous species versus the non-monogamous species.
So that would point to me that this is a fairly complex change. It's not just something you would expect kind of run-of-the-mill or expect a lot to pop up. 24 things that kind of work together, that's just hard to do. I get it.
Right. So the improbability of those 24 changes happening in a single species is fairly remote. But for those same changes to happen independently in species that would be, from an evolutionary perspective, separated, their lineages would have been separated from each other for 450 million years, indicates that these genetic changes occurred independently, but in an identical way in each of these different lineages.
So if you'd had some 450 million year old monogamous species that populated or gave rise to the rest, that would be easier to do. But the fact that you've got these kind of related pairs that some are monogamous and non-monogamous, and then across the animal kingdom in different ones, it's the fact that some are, some aren't, and yet they all share this common genetic signature, if you will.
Right. So it's one thing to think that maybe monogamous behavior arose independently in an evolutionary context, but for it to arise independently and be driven by the identical genetic changes is really uncomfortable. And even the researchers that were looking at this result that were, again, steeped within the evolutionary paradigm expressed dismay at this particular result.
It seems like this is something that shows this kind of phenomena where you've got disparate, or the same features showing up in disparate species, that seems to be a relative. I know I've heard you talk about that before. Is this a common thing? How common? What do scientists, how do they talk about this?
This is an example of what's called convergence, which in a nutshell means that you have organisms that are not related to each other that have identical or near identical biological features. And this can be at the organismal level, anatomical, physiological, identical features, or even at the biochemical or the genetic level. And it looks as if they arose independently, again, multiple times. And this phenomenon is called convergence, and it's problematic because you wouldn't expect convergence in an evolutionary scenario. Because
explain why.
Yeah, because evolution is a historically contingent process, meaning it's predicated on a sequence of chance events. And the likelihood of repeating those chance events in the same identical way 2 separate times is highly remote. So Stephen Jay Gould, the evolutionary biologist, used this metaphor that if you could rewind the tape of life and replay it, the expectation is the outcome would be different, because if you altered even one of those events in that sequence ever so slightly, you'd send the evolutionary trajectory in different directions. So we've got these discordant observations. One is that evolution should be historically contingent and shouldn't repeat. And the other is that we see countless examples of where it looks like as if evolution repeatedly hit upon the same outcome. And this origin of monogamy is an extreme example, in my opinion, where, again, you're looking at these 24 identical genetic changes in different species.
Yeah, that really does strike me as a very difficult thing to just have happen multiple times. So it has this problematic or troublesome explanation within an evolutionary paradigm. As from a creationist perspective, how do we look at that?
Well, to me, I think that this idea of convergence fits elegantly in a creation model or a design framework. And think about it this way: engineers oftentimes, once they figure out a solution to a problem, will redeploy it independently multiple times. When I worked for in R&D for a Fortune 500 company, we had a mantra that was called search and reapply.
Right.
Don't invent something new. See what we have on the shelf and try to pull it off and use it to develop your technology.
That's most of the way I computer program, and I mean, it's foundation to how we computer program is use what's already there, maybe modify it a little bit. So
yeah, so to me, you would if there was a creator responsible for the diversity of life and the designs we see in biology, then you'd expect convergence to be a widespread feature. So to me, it's not only a challenge to the evolutionary paradigm, but it's exactly how I would expect nature to look if there was a creator responsible for it.
Well, and I find it interesting that it plays out in something that's very important to human life. We talk about marriage, that's kind of the ultimate close bond you can have in some sense. The fact that has this feature in it that points towards a creator seems kind of remarkable as well.
Yeah, and it'd be really interesting to see if those same kind of genetic features appear in humans as well as in these animals. That would be really provocative, because there are great apes that are not monogamous, right? They have a very different reproductive lifestyle. Gorillas and chimpanzees as an example. And so it'd be interesting to do that comparative genomic study with humans and with the great apes, where you could make a prediction from a creation model perspective that you would see the same genetic changes in humans as you do in these other species, or the same genetic features, maybe is a better way of saying it.
Thanks, Fuzz. I appreciate your comments. When we look at what Christianity has to say about monogamy, it really does point towards a creator. And I find it interesting, as Fuzz has identified here, that as scientists have explored the origins of monogamy, it really does point towards a creator who's found a mechanism to make it work, employed it multiple times, and trying to explain that behavior within an evolutionary paradigm really struggles to find a good fit. I'd encourage you to go to reasons.org, search for monogamy, and you'll find Fuzz's article on this that will equip you to use this powerful tool to go out and point others to the truth of the Bible.